a quorum of the board. So it is 2:11 p.m. and I call the February 17th, 2026 meeting of the Texas Space Commission Board of Directors to order. Before we begin, I request that anybody in the room mute your devices and put them in silent mode. Norman, will you please take roll?
Yes, ma'am. Chair Gwen Griffin.
Here.
Vice Chair Kathy Leaders.
Here.
Secretary Kirk Shireman.
Here.
Dr. Nancy Curry-Gregg.
Here.
Sassy Duggleby.
Here.
Brad Morrison.
Here.
John Shannon.
Here.
Dr. Heather Wilson.
Here.
Evan Loomis. Ma'am, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here in Dallas as several of us are participating in the Space Foundation's Innovate Space Finance Forum for the next few days. And I'll just say I'm impressed with our environment, and thank you to the Space Foundation for allowing us to do our board meeting today. I'd also like to thank the Texas Space Commission Board and TARSEC Executive Committee members for their time and talent in serving on one or more of 5 work groups that we've held over the last few months. And thank you to the board that have continued scoring remaining SURF grants in your individual portals. So lots of thanks. I'd like to just go ahead and dig right into today's agenda. So let's move to item 3 in your board book for the board members. We need to consider approval of meeting minutes from our December 19th, 2025 meeting and ask any directors if you have any changes or recommended edits to the meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, move approval of the minutes.
All right. Thank you for the motion to approve the minutes, Dr. Wilson, and may I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brad. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. The minutes are approved. Over to you, Norman, for Executive Director remarks.
Thank you, ma'am. Excuse me. I'd like to first start by giving an update in terms of the total grant agreements that have been underway with our team. As a reminder to the public, 23 proposals have been approved. 19 to date are fully executed. That's 3 more since my last update to the board in December. And the rundown for situational awareness is 1 agreement has hit my inbox today. So before the day's over, it will be approved and go out to that awardee for their action. 1 is awaiting signatures by the awardee that we've already sent that out to. 1, we're awaiting some revised documents from the awardee to complete that grant agreement, and then there's 1 in the queue for some further action as part of that negotiation process. So making progress, and definitely want to give kudos to the team, and we've got Melinda here with us today and others back home as well. Next, I'd also like to report participation either by myself or some of the TSC board members at some national engagements over the last couple of months. First, as a reminder, the Space Force Association's Space Power Conference in December, we're able to hear from many of the top brass from the Space Force, including some conversations very strategic with the National Security Space Launch Portfolio in particular. A candid meeting we were able to have, ma'am, as you know, but for everybody else, the chair and I were able to visit with the new NASA administrator during his visit to Johnson Space Center not too long ago. I also were joined by folks at TxDOT, the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, and the University of North Texas, at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine's Transportation Research Board. Some good ideas that they've got, and they'd like to contribute to that book of work when it comes to research and development as well. And then finally, the Global Spaceport Alliance Summit. Director, Vice Chair Kathy Leaders was on a panel with the Space Florida CEO, Rob Long, also, so that all took place. Just for awareness of all of the engagements underway. Now I'd like to recognize our CFO as a reminder, Mr. Warren Collier, joint dual hat, if you will, CFO for Office of the Governor and the Texas Space Commission. He's online. I've asked him to join us to provide a short summary about the agency's balance sheet that was in your board book, and he'll be available to answer any questions. Over to Warren.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I can share my screen or not, but if I can, essentially what you have in your packet is our budget and expenditures for the past couple of years. If you look at the kind of the structure of the document, it's broken out like we would see in maybe a legislative budget request or something like that. It's administration first and programmatic second. I have a couple of highlights that I would like to point out. And first, it's on the administrative funding side, we have collected in excess of $22 million to date in interest earned on the dollars that are in the trust. Now, we are projecting a total of $16 million for budget year 26 simply because of the amount that we now have in the trust. I would caution, though, that this is based upon the Treasury pool rates at the Texas Comptroller's Office, which peaked about a year ago at close to 5%, and we're currently down to about 4%. So if that decline continues, you're going to see a reduction in that. If we look at that administrative section, though, you can see the expenses by year, and this is broken out by, or the cost categories that we're looking at are what we would call LBB object codes. So at some point, if the Space Commission has to present a legislative appropriation request, it would go to the Legislative Budget Board, and these are the cost categories that they use. So it's beneficial for us to put our expenses in the same manner. If there is something that you would like to see separate, feel free to let me know and we can modify this. The important thing in this upper section, though, is where we're going to be at the end of this fiscal year, which will be August 31st, 2022. If you look at the projected amount of interest earned, less the projected expenditures, we're around 22 million that we would have in the state treasury that we can use for administrative or other purposes. Okay. The other thing that I would note that I put on here was a percentage of the year and then a percentage expended. This is just a nice little way to say we're 5 months into the year, we're 41% into the year, and we've expended a total of 28% of our budget. So we have excess budget on hand, and a lot of that relates to salary and wages. You can have positions that are not filled or build in potential merit pool, things like that. The second section on here deals with the amounts that are in the trust that are going to be contracted out or have been contracted out. You'll note in 2024, we've received 150 million, and in 2026, the 300 million. Expenditures out the door to date as of January 31st was about 3.2 million with 75.5 million encumbered. And then we're budgeting another 72.8 million to be encumbered in 2026. And obviously, as those encumbrances are liquidated, they will turn into expenditures. That encumbered amount for 2026 can change substantially as the Space Commission contracts additional dollars out. So that's kind of a fluid number, but if it did stick at the $72 million range, that would leave us with about 298 for 2027 and beyond. That concludes my remarks. If you have any questions, feel free to either ask them now or send them to Norman or me, and we'll get that information to you.
Thank you, Warren, and thanks for joining us today. It's great to see you. Any questions from our board members for Warren or for Norman? Okay, thank you again, and Norman, thanks for the report.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to turn the floor over to our TARSEC Chair, Stephanie Murphy, to provide a report from their executive committee. Are you with us, Stephanie?
Great, thank you.
Great.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Gwen and Norman, for the opportunity to give you a quick update on TARSEC, short and sweet today. I'd like to start off just by thanking our TARSEC Executive Committee. They continue to give their time and efforts, especially the last couple months, supporting TSC on these working group initiatives. And so I really appreciate the colleagues that I had an opportunity to work with on the Executive Committee. Couple quick updates. One, we continue to take private entities and nonprofits across the state as members into the TARSEC consortium. There have been some questions from our members about why they're not showing up in the directory that's available to the members on the online portal. And so just a reminder that their profile is available in the directory once they complete the company profile, which includes uploading photos and logos and things of that nature, completing the contact information. So just a reminder that if you're not showing up in the directory that's on the membership portal, it may be because the company profile is not complete. And that's easy to do right there on the profile, or we're happy to help anyone who may need assistance. The other thing that TARSEC has coming up, in addition to supporting the working groups and connecting our members with those working groups, is we are in planning for a workshop likely to be held late summer and likely around the San Antonio area. The goal of that workshop is to provide resources and information in either a half-day or three-quarter day style workshop to help Texas businesses prepare for defense work that may be coming to the state. So this started off as a CMMC-focused event to help entities learn how to get CMMC certified and what that means to be prepared to do work with the DoD. But we've had some great brainstorming exercises with recently with Lieutenant Colonel Kopecki, who is the director of the Space Force operating location in Austin currently, over the cyberspace ops. And out of that brainstorming, we thought that opening up the agenda a little bit broader would be beneficial to some of the Texas entities. So it may also include information on how to deal with cleared personnel, for example, or what infrastructure may be needed to do defense work, or what small business opportunities may be available through organizations like SpaceWorks. And so we're still doing brainstorming on that, but we'll be bringing that agenda forward over the next couple months and planning for a late summer workshop. We've also connected with Chief White from the Texas Cyber Command, who's been very beneficial in providing some resources and maybe some panelists and experts who can assist as well. So tying in Space Force as well as local state resources to help pull that together. So we're looking forward to that. Those are the only updates I have from TARSEC. Happy to answer any other questions that you may have. Otherwise, I'll sign off.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Any questions or comments? Back to Stephanie for TARSEC report. Okay. Thank you so much. As I mentioned in the opening, over the past few months, the Commission Board and the TARSEC Executive Committee have been addressing what I'll call key space topics in small working groups. The work groups have included launch, return, reentry, LEO or low Earth orbit, national security, lunar, workforce development. And first, I'd like to, we're going to have some reports today from each of the working groups. So first, let's hear from the Launch, Return, Reentry Work Group. I believe Matt Onler and Brad is sitting here with me, so if you guys will provide that overview to the full board. There's Matt. You're muted, Matt.
How about now?
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, Gwen, for the opportunity to brief you and the full TSC on the activity of our working group. Our working group was the Launch and Return Reentry Working Group. We really think this is an area that the state is uniquely positioned to grow this capability for not only the state, but for the country. Our work group was made up of 3 TSC members and 3 TARSEC members. The TSC Board of Directors were Kathy Leaders, Brad Morrison, John Shannon, and from TARSEC it was myself, Jack Fisher, and Shay Sabrapour. We held several virtual meetings, and we have 2 recommendations for your consideration and consideration of the TSC Board. So essentially 2 deliverables and then 1 set of actions that are aligned to that. The first recommendation is to do a detailed launch and landing corridor assessment. While our working group was very experienced space professionals, there's only so much you can do with sort of back of the envelope analysis. You really need to develop a high fidelity simulation with representative entry and launch vehicle classes. We need to pick a couple representative launch sites, including inland sites. And again, I think that's a capability that our group thought was important for the country, is to develop more inland launch capability. And again, Texas may be very uniquely positioned to supply that for the state. It's also important to look at a set of mission classes. So from GEO satellite launch, the International Space Station, to polar missions. Again, to overharp on the great state of Texas, but there are even locations in Texas where a polar mission could be very, very viable, where most of the launch is over water. And then take those set of initial conditions, look at different dispersion abort cases. Part of the complexity of launch is all the abort cases that you have to consider, and then overlay that with population density to develop ground safety capability. And the end product is a recommended site report with assessments on public safety and the capability that these launch sites could produce. The second problem that we addressed, and while the physics of getting to space and re-entering from space is difficult, sometimes the paperwork can be even harder. And so we recognize that to support Texas companies that want to develop these kind of capabilities, and to support companies coming into Texas that want to build launch capability or re-entry capability, it was important to have a study that looked at all of the different agencies, both federal and state, that have some regulatory role in launch and re-entry. And our preliminary look showed that there's a lot of those. And so likely some overlapping roles and maybe conflicting requirements. And so we thought it was important to fund a study to take a look at those and develop what we called the Texas Launch and Landing Playbook. So a set of capabilities that would make it easy for companies to build those kind of launch and landing capabilities in Texas, because it was a well understood regulatory path. We think probably falling out of that also is some state capability that would help companies to produce products that the FAA needs for those kind of licensing. So those are the two basic recommendations: a detailed study on launch and landing corridor, and then a development of a Texas launch and landing playbook. I think near term is developing this prioritized map of candidate sites, assessing some enabling infrastructure needs. We recognize that there might be some great sites in South Texas that would be great places to launch from, but maybe some infrastructure needs in terms of roads, bridges, and other capability. Similarly, there might be some great places in rural Texas to launch from, but is there the workforce support for those capabilities? So doing a workforce demographic and gap analysis is also important. And then, as I mentioned, creating this operations and permitting playbook, and not only from the permitting standpoint, but also even operational, making it easy to coordinate launches, to contact the right state agencies, to coordinate launches and notices to airmen and potential emergency response as well.
Great.
I think that was our high-level summary. And our working group stands by to support further if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Brad, anything to add there?
I don't. Thanks, Matt. Great job.
Yeah, I appreciate the specificity around two key areas, so appreciate that work and look forward to reading the report. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Leaders to provide the low Earth orbit or LEO work group update. Over to you, Kathy.
So Madam Chair, the LEO working group consisted also of members of both the Texas Space Commission, Board of Directors, and TARSEC. Out of the Texas Space Commission, it was myself, Dr. Curry Gregg, Kirk Shireman, and from TARSEC, Dr. David Alexander, Mr. Jack Fisher, Dr. Lori Magruder, and Mr. Shea Zavapur were the primary members of the working group. We met multiple times. I really appreciated the diverse participation of the team. There was kind of 3 focus areas that we spent time on. I mean, really looking at the breadth of potential and the need for creating flight opportunities and business for high TRL payloads on both NASA, on Texas launch providers, but also other Texas platforms that are currently in work and enabling and a bridge between Texas capabilities and Texas research capabilities. The other focus area was really looking at ensuring that we're adopting the dual use high TRL grant strategies. Our job is not to do the initial research, but really to look at maturing near market technologies, close certification, any production readiness gaps, and looking at how do we help support real world demo validations. And then third focus areas was looking at where were key shared infrastructures that remove current bottlenecks for business and research facilities in Texas. And we had discussions about radiation testing, environmental test, any specialized manufacturing, and looking at ways to be able to structure it to be able to also complement the federal assets and private investment that's out there. So we had 2 primary recommendations at this time. One was to launch a flagship program. We even came up with the name, the Texas STAR Spaceflight Technology Acceleration for Readiness, and which would support and through by guaranteeing annual small payload launches. It provide a pipeline for universities that would work and pair with payload integration, test integration infrastructure. For example, consistent with the Texas Space Institute concept and cooperation with NASA's Johnson Space Center. Looking at continuing to deploy routing incentives to keep firms' intellectual property in state, including leveraging capabilities such as exploration park area, for example. So really looking at leveraging what are the existing areas, but to be able to provide low Earth orbit opportunities for Texas-based payload and launch providers. And then the second recommendation was to expand on the TAMU cyclotron capacity, using that is a current radiation testing is a current bottlenecked area. So finding ways to leverage that funded capability and to be able to enable companies and research facilities and partnering with our DoD and other partners to be able to continue to further the use of that facility and remove a current roadblock in low Earth payload development and spacecraft development. So that was a high-level summary of the discussions. I invite anybody else that was on the working group to add any comments at this time. If not, thank you for your support and really appreciate all the ideas and communication on this really, really important area. And I turn this over back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks to all that worked on that working group for LEO. So next up, I'd like to turn the floor to Dr. David Alexander for the Lunar Work Group. update.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Like a lot of these working groups, the discussions was really thrilling, and it was a pleasure to participate in them. The Lunar Working Group, we had a couple of members from the Texas Space Commission, Sassy Doubleby and John Shannon. And then from the TARSEC Executive Committee, there was Jack Fisher, Laurie Magruder, Jason Kim, and myself. We had lots of interesting discussions and tried to sort of focus in on some key areas. You can see how hard it was that we have 8 specific recommendations which come with some implementation ideas as well. The first is to focus the Commission investments on specific lunar and cislunar capability areas that Texas already has some strength but can maintain that leadership going forward. These include things like power, including fission, surface power, lots of acronyms, in situ resource utilization, on the digital side, lunar data processing, AI and machine learning techniques, and then terrain mapping, for the LTVs, for the rovers and so on. Consider cislunar space situational awareness and space domain awareness. I don't know if I'm echoing or... and then one of the key areas is positioning, navigation, and timing on the surface to support human exploration. Is everyone else hearing an echo? So I don't know if you're getting a chance to hear me with not just with my accent, but with the double echo here. To support NASA's mission and the human exploration, there's need for improvements in ECLIS, environmental control and life support systems. And then, of course, we have to come up with technologies to survive the 2-week night on the surface of the moon. So those extreme environment operations. The next recommendation, the rest are a little bit shorter, is to bring in the technology development side. We'd like to adopt a high TRL, technology readiness level, focus with a path to application, particularly for lunar research and development and maturation of technologies that are in the labs today. We would like, obviously, to leverage the Texas A&M Space Institute facility down by the Johnson Space Center to help develop, test, and validate these lunar technologies. We'd like to position Texas to support the Artemis program and to compete for the commercial lunar payload services contracts that will be coming out, again, by enabling viable commercial technologies for the various NASA mission directorates, whether it be exploration or science. Like I think a number of the working groups, we need to run a Texas lunar capability mapping and gap analysis. Companies, universities, facilities, workforce, and pair this with mission critical technology and facilities to review and define priorities. So again, this is something I think is common to many of the working groups. What do we have? What don't we have? Where don't we have it? I think we need to do that across the board for a lot of these areas, these high priority areas. One of the implementation approaches that we discussed was to use payload contracts as a primary accelerator. So in other words, to fly these high TRL, technology readiness level tech demos to the moon, preferably using Texas launch and return capabilities. That goes back to the first working group we heard from, and to complement this with targeted investment in some of the key areas that I mentioned above: environmental support, control and life support, in situ resource utilization, and space domain awareness, and also to use the test facilities that we have and will be developing through the course of the coming years. And ideally, we would like to execute these payloads through recurring proposal calls. And so in other words, to implement this by having, maybe frequent calls a year, whether it be 2 or 3 or more. A few areas that came up, we recognized that there was actually leading expertise in other states. And so it would be probably a stretch for Texas to try and catch up with those. But that led to the notion that we should pursue state-to-state collaboration on advanced material centers of excellence in particular, so that we can strengthen the supply chain for what we're doing here in Texas, and to help develop the training where other states have expertise that allows us to leverage existing capabilities with partner states around the country. And our final recommendation was to strengthen the Department of Defense and NASA ties via a PIA-type relation. I'm realizing how many acronyms are in this particular report, so I apologize. DoD is Department of Defense, NASA, I think you all know, and PIA is a partnership intermediary agreement which allows the state to go into partnerships with the federal government. But we'd like to strengthen those ties to support dual-use lunar and cislunar capabilities. So apologies for all the acronyms, Madam Chair, but that was as high a level of discussion as I can put together on our lunar working group. I think there's a lot for us to do. And I'm excited to see how we go forward. So again, thank you all for your support on this, for the great discussions. And then I'll cede the floor to questions or any of my other committee members, working group members who might like to add.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And thank you. What would our industry be without all these space acronyms, right? Every industry seems to come with their playbook of acronyms. So now to the Workforce Development Work Group. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lori Magruder. Dr. Magruder, there you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Workforce Development Working Group, we're focused primarily on articulating recommendations as a roadmap for priority workforce needs statewide, with particular focus on technician to PhD continuum, policymakers, and management leadership. So the folks in this working group were from the Space Commission, Kathy Leaders and Sassy Duggleby, and then from TARSEC, it was myself and David Alexander. We also held several virtual meetings for conversations about our recommendations. So you can imagine in the last few months, there was a flurry of scheduling of all these working groups. The working group came up with multiple recommendations, actually 5 specific ones for consideration. The first one, similar to the other groups, is to stand up a dedicated statewide space workforce needs assessment team, basically the fact finders, trying to look at how to quantify gaps and map the roles needed to competencies, credentials, career pathways. And we can do this using employer surveys, labor trend analysis, and mission or technology forecasting. The second recommendation was to empower TARSEC to lead a modular workforce pathway development across trades, certifications, and degrees. So that recommendation would be supported by certainly the statewide participation or resource surveys. We also recommend to create clusters of what we'll call space academies that are aligned to priority domains. The initial space academies can be prototyped by choosing 2 flagship tradecraft mission, pilot curricula, with the goal of integrating hands-on training and industry engagement. The fourth recommendation was to build a durable cross-sector pipeline architecture. So this architecture would link the academia, trade schools, government, and industry partners to establish best practices. It could coordinate internships and externships, employer participation in capstones, as an example, and then reskilling and upskilling programs. I guess this is the fourth recommendation, is expand K through 12 activation statewide. This is for K through 12 students and educators alike, and just figure out better pathways for early recruitment into this Texas space workforce. And the final recommendation was to outline a path for increasing clearance-ready talent pipelines. So by facilitating background checks processes at colleges or university campuses, as an example. So again, this is the high-level overview of workforce development working group. And like everyone, I enjoyed this exercise. Thank you for facilitating, and we'll stand by and tell us how you want us to move forward. Over to you, ma'am.
Great, thank you, Lori. Appreciate that. a lot to do, certainly, in workforce development always, and I'm glad to see that we're looking at the K through PhD in our efforts. So last of the 5 work groups, I want to mention that the National Security Defense Work Group's also been fast at work. However, per Government Code Chapter 482 and Chapter 551, this report will be provided at a later time. So thank you to the leads of each of these work groups for summarizing the top level items today for us. What I see from today's conversation is really that Texas has the opportunity to move decisively, not only to fund innovation, but to build the infrastructure, the flight cadence, the workforce alignment, national security relevance that sustains long-term leadership. And I know that's something that we as a board think about, is that sustaining long-term leadership for the state and for our nation. So as we consider deployment of the SURF Trust, our responsibility is to ensure that investments are coordinated, mission-driven, and scalable so that the whole of Texas benefits from a disciplined, integrated space strategy. So accordingly, I would like to provide clear direction to Norman as our Executive Director. First, you are authorized and encouraged to secure any necessary external subject matter experts, financial advisors, infrastructure planners, defense integration specialists, or economic modeling entities required to responsibly implement this framework. These funds must be deployed with the benefit of specialized expertise where appropriate. Second, I'm directing you to coordinate with the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts to initiate an updated economic impact analysis of NASA's Johnson Space Center and its statewide economic contribution. The 2019 report provided important baseline data, however, it predates the Artemis program expansion, commercial launch growth, and the establishment of this commission. Updated empirical analysis is essential to assure our capital deployment aligns with current economic realities and projected multipliers. So if necessary, then you should coordinate with other state agencies, such as the Texas Workforce Commission, the Texas Education Agency, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, Texas Veterans Commission, Institutes of Higher Education, Texas Military Preparedness Commission, and relevant federal entities such as NASA or the U.S. Space Force. Third, I would like this commission to review at an appropriate future meeting a master plan document outlining the best roadmap that enables an expanded ecosystem adjacent NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. We must ensure that state-funded initiatives align strategically with federal opportunities and constraints. So therefore, Norman, as our Executive Director, please brief the board's ad hoc work groups in the coming weeks about the following: a proposed scope and timeline for the economic impact update, recommendations regarding qualified external subject matter experts, and a proposed framework for master planning review. Again, I'll state that this commission is committed to disciplined, data-driven, and coordinated deployment of state resources, and we look forward to reviewing your recommendations. So with that, let's move on to our next item. So in your board book, members, we will take a look at additional SURF grant application consideration. So any questions before we begin this next step? Okay. Hearing none, members, relevant details of the application before us today is in your board book. In accordance with Texas Space Commission rules, if a board member has a conflict of interest as described in those rules, the board member will disclose that conflict of interest in this open meeting as the matter arises and recuse him or herself from participating in review, discussion, deliberation, and voting on that matter. Board members have already disclosed their written notifications as required by the rules, and they have not accessed information regarding the applications in which they are conflicted. First, we have application 250014G from Rice University. For the record, Dr. Wilson has a conflict with this application. Do any other board members have a conflict of interest on this application? Okay. If not, then application 250014G is a grant application for Rice University requesting $16 million for research, development, and equipment. This project would create a Center for Space Technologies within the Rice Space Institute for targeted R&D, technology transfer and innovation, statewide partnerships, workforce training, and space-focused education. The goal is to fulfill an articulated need for research, workforce development, and industry collaboration. Proposed research portfolio consists of advancing sustainable human lunar exploration and discovery with a primary focus on in situ resource development and utilization, ISRDU, that is a key element of NASA's Artemis program. Board members, as you know, the balance of uncommitted dollars from the $150 million appropriation in the 2023 Texas legislature for SURF grants is less than this application requests. As such, if the board approves this grant application, then it would be considered a partial award of the remaining $14,154,767 of the 2023 SURF grant funding, and TSC staff will work with the applicant to align its projected scope and budget with this partial authorized award amount, all of which is subject to execution of the grant agreement. Members, is there any discussion on application 250014G? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the award for application 250014G in the amount of up to $14,154,767 for research development equipment conditioned on the applicant's successful completion of the Commission's administrative background assessments and acceptance of grant agreement terms?
So moved.
Thank you, Brad. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kirk. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Did I hear Nancy?
Sassy and Nancy.
Sassy and Nancy.
I said aye.
Okay, great.
Aye.
All right. General Counsel approves. Any nays? Hearing none, the grant award for application 250014G is approved.
Madam Chair, I abstain.
Thank you, ma'am. My apologies. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. Is there any further business to attend to? Hearing none, our meeting is adjourned at 2:53. Thank you all, and thanks for the reports from the work groups. Appreciate it, and have a great afternoon, everyone.